Hello and thank you for joining us for another Airbrush Asylum video. In this Airbrush Insight video, we're going to take a look at the Sagola XTECH 500 double action suction feed airbrush. This has a 0.5mm needle. It comes in a nice case, the same as all the other Sagola airbrushes. So you can also check out those videos. We took a look at the couple of the other models in the range. On the back here you can see they list all the other airbrushes and some of the specs as well. So like I said, this is the suction feed XTECH 500. That's what it comes with. It's got the little eyedropper, which is pretty handy. Obviously the jar being a suction feed. You've got the, I won't pull it out, but you've got the tool there to remove the head assembly. An adapter for the bottom of the to hook up your airbrush hose, so you can hook up another hose, feed that through, and then crimp that on. Let's pull that out. Get rid of the box. Okay. So you've got nice double action. Let's hook up the jar. Again, like the other Sagola airbrushes, we've got this really cool rubber protector cap. Another signature feature is the anodized red crown air cap and the anodized handle with the XTECH 500 listed on there. So we're going to go ahead, give this one a bit of a test run and see how she sprays. So you get the airbrush hose, just hook that on. Plug it in, we have action, unscrew the jar, and we're going to just use a bit of water-based black paint to test it. This has already got some reducer in there, so we'll just fill the jar up just under halfway. So generally suction feed airbrushes are good for larger areas, especially with a 0.5mm needle. A lot of t-shirt artists like these, they'll have a whole collection of these just sitting there with all different colours in them, so they can do really quick artwork and punch out lots and lots of shirts. Now also for mural painters, these are pretty handy because they do hold a little bit more paint, so if you're doing a larger area it's good. The only drawback I find with a suction is that gravity is just a natural flow of when the paint flows through the airbrush, whereas a suction, obviously it needs to suck up the paint through the hose there, so it can produce a bit more of a lag as opposed to something like a gravity feed brush. But we'll give it a go and see how she sprays. I'll spray it first with the crown cap on, and then we'll remove that, and hopefully that'll allow us to get some finer detail as well. Considering this is a 0.5mm needle, we'll see if we can do broad spray and fine detail. Quite comfortable, so the trigger's on a bit of an angle like the other Sagola brushes. It is nice and comfy in your hand. I tend to always hold the jar like that as well when I'm using a suction feed. So let's go ahead and give it a bit of a spray. So I can definitely feel there's a lot more paint coming out of this, which is good. It's what you want. So it's definitely a kind of airbrush that will pump it on, and I think would work really nicely for even body painting, mural work, t-shirt artwork, anything where you don't need super fine detail. You can see how much coverage I'm getting there, how quickly I can cover an area. So that's really good. We want to see that from a suction feed for sure. But it still has a reasonable spray. Can create nice fine lines pretty quickly. Straight lines, sorry, they're not the finest, but we'll go a bit finer. Give that a go. So let's go up a bit closer, air on. I'll rest my hand just to steady myself. Paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off. paint on, paint off. So we get a nice straight line. I'm still getting a bit of this almost crackling coming off the line, so it's not spraying perfectly, but as I said with the other test videos, you can see there's a bit of a gap there. I've just unboxed these and this is the first time I'm spraying with them. So generally with airbrushes, even any other brands that are brand new, I always find that it takes a few hours at least, or to do 1 or 2 artworks to really get them flowing nicely. So I find that straight out of the box, they're always a bit, they just don't perform as well as an airbrush that's been used over and over. So pretty responsive on the trigger, which is good. So trying to go a bit finer here, I'm getting a bit of a lag. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this crown cap off, and we'll spray with just the needle exposed. See if we can get some finer detail. So just picking off a bit of the tip drying. It's definitely spraying nicer with that air cap removed. Getting a bit of drag still. So I might have a blockage in that front section. So just blast that out a couple of times, reseat the needle, and see if that's made a difference. Still getting a little bit of trailing. You can see there, this part here trailing a little bit off that line. So decent enough suction feed airbrush. Look, I still prefer gravity feed personally, but I can see how this would work well for a t-shirt artist, someone who's not too fussed about having super fine detail would find this quite helpful. It definitely does spray the paint on, but I think I need to run it for a bit longer just to get it to really run a bit smoother, because I am getting a bit more trailing. And I think, as I said earlier, I think that's just because it's brand new. Once the needle and nozzle wear in a few times after painting for a few hours, I think it'll definitely run even better than this. So still getting decent enough spray with it, but we can go relatively fine. Oh, it's already starting to get better there. So you can see, even just after 5 or 10 minutes of painting, it's already making a difference. But yeah, apart from that, good little suction feed airbrush. So I think these are all priced, all the Sagola gear is priced sort of middle range. So definitely a quality product for a reasonable price. So yeah, I look forward to doing a proper artwork with these products and seeing how they perform after quite a few hours of painting. Okay, let's take a closer look at the Sagola XTECH 500. So obviously, being a suction feed, this is the jar that comes with it. You got the little breather hole in the top there, just like all of the suction feed airbrushes have. And we'll just hook this up. So you can see it just twists on. So there's no thread or anything to hold it, but it does stay in place. All right, so it's nice and snug. The red anodized handle with the XTECH 500 engraved in there. You can see the Sagola logo, Spain. and we've got the nice rubber cap to protect it, as well as the signature crown cap. So we'll just unscrew that. Again, this one's brand new and it's quite tight. So let me just get that one off. There we go. And you can see the 0.5mm needle, so just sticking out there. As you've seen just before, you can spray without the air cap on, which is nice and handy. The trigger action is quite comfortable, so press down for air, pull back for paint. The more you pull back, the more paint you'll get. Again, this is a 0.5 needle and it's designed more for broad spray and general airbrushing, so you're not going to get the super fine detail as you would with something like the XTECH 200 or the XTECH 300. So let's just remove that jar to make it a bit easier to pull this apart. Get that out of the shot. Okay, so we're just going to, well, first and foremost, we've cleaned the airbrush. We were using water-based paint, so we've cleaned the jar just using water. You can also use airbrush cleaner, and we've flushed through this area here. Really important to do that. And then also we've unscrewed the handle, right, and loosened the little nut there, pulled the needle out, and we've flushed through the back there as well. So with whatever cleaner you're using, so if you're using, say, automotive paint, you would then clean it with a gun wash or a reducer. In this case, we were using water-based paint, so we've just used water to clean that out. All right, very important to clean out in the back section of the airbrush, otherwise paint can sit up in along the back of that needle. You can probably even see there, there's still a bit of black sort of showing up there, but yeah, so you want to make sure that that is nice and clean. So we'll just pop that needle down. Let's just pull this all apart. So we'll unscrew this and we can have a good look at how the airbrush is pulled apart and how it's set up. So we've got the spring there. Now you can adjust this slightly, but only slightly for your trigger tension. So depending on what brushes you're used to, but this one it is possible. It's just not as there's not as much scope with it. Okay, so we just remove the trigger there. Got part of the rocker assembly. Okay, so that's a separate piece. So some other brands have that joined on, but in this case it is a separate piece. Okay, we can see down the guts of the airbrush there as well. So decent enough manufacturing, reasonable quality. And we've also got the bottom section there where the plunger assembly is, so let's go ahead and pull that apart as well. I'm just going to use these tweezers here, stick them into that, and carefully unscrew this and watch that the spring doesn't fly everywhere. There we go, there we have it. So there's the spring, and we've got the little piston as well. So that's the whole airbrush pulled apart. Let's just sit that there. So we've got that part, which is part of the rocker assembly, the trigger, the rear section, which screws back onto the rear of the airbrush, the spring for the rocker assembly, the other shaft, which makes up the other part of the rocker assembly, the locking nut, obviously the crown cap. So these are really lightweight. They look to be aluminium, which is quite cool, and the rubber protector cap. Alright, so they're all the parts. So let's go ahead and put it all back together. So let's start with getting the plunger assembly back together. So this seal has to go up into here. So that's where your trigger will be pressing down. This is the bit that you would replace if you want to fit a soft spring. So I know a lot of people are into that. We're a distributor for the Drew Blair soft springs, and they do make a difference, and they fit quite a few different brands of airbrush. So let's just get this in place. So you need to get the piston to go in the center part there, and make sure that that thread is grabbing, and that's it. So it's back in there. And then we fit the trigger. So that notch that you can see there, that goes towards the back of the airbrush. Because it's got this crossbar, twist it and then sit it down. And you can see that's now pressing down on that plunger assembly, so you know you got that all hooked up correctly. The next piece, which is also tricky to get in, is this part here, which is the section of the rocker assembly. Grab the tweezers, place it down and twist. Okay, once that's into place, I'm going to press this in here. Put the spring back on and then seal it all back up. Now, to check that that's working correctly before you go ahead and put the handle on, just press down on your trigger and pull back, and it should be bouncing back. You can see it's just slipped out of there. That's easy enough to fix. Put that back in. Alright, and now we can put the locking nut on. Don't have to fully tighten it, just keep it loose so that we can get the needle back in. Slide the needle in, press it all the way to the forward. Don't jam it, like you don't want to push too hard because you could damage the nozzle. And then we tighten that up. And there you have it. I'm going to quickly remove the front of this. And that way you can see the air cap. So it's got the cone style air cap there with the Teflon seal, which is pretty cool. And you can see the little air holes there. So we'll just fit that back in, hook that back up, tighten that. Again, this is the 0.5mm needle. Put the crown cap back on and reinsert the needle. Tightening the back here. Make sure that's tight so that when you press down and pull back, it pulls the needle back. If you leave this loose and the needle doesn't move, that will not allow paint to come out. So you'll figure it out when you've got paint in there and you're thinking, I'm pulling back, but nothing's coming out. Always check that locking nut's tight. The handle back on. And the protector cap. And there you have it. The XTECH 500 all pulled apart and reassembled. Until next time, feel free to check out any of our other videos, and thanks again for watching. We do really appreciate it. In the meantime, if you haven't already, feel free to hit subscribe. We have plenty of step-by-step tutorials, quick tips, airbrush insight, showcase, live streams, and much more. You can also visit our website at airbrushasylum.com.au. Thanks for watching.